Magicant. Magicant is a dreamscape within Ness's mind. What makes this area so special is that it embodies everything that made EarthBound the cult classic it is today. Surreal visuals, weird NPCs, and an underlying thread of genuine human emotion that connects it all together. Magicant is an honest portrayal of Ness's identity, a character who has been a silent protagonist up until this point. It only makes sense to do a Ness analysis right after covering Sans, so today, we'll dive deep into the entire Magicant sequence to not only better understand what it represents, but to answer a question that I haven't seriously thought about in all of my years playing this game. Just who is Ness? But before we can answer that and truly appreciate Magicant for what it is, we need to establish the purpose of a silent protagonist. These characters are blank slates designed for immersion. In Pokemon, you're the kid destined to become the champion. In Zelda, you're the hero of Hyrule. Their silence lets you project yourself onto them. Ness works the same way. You name him, his dog, his favorite food, even his signature psychic attack. For many players, you don't play as Ness, you are Ness. This lines up with how series creator Shigesato Itoi described him. In a 1992 Famitsu column, Itoi explained that players can see Ness as either the same protagonist from Mother 1, or a totally different kid depending on their perspective. Years later in 2015, he doubled down. The players provide information about Ness. In other words, Ness isn't fully grounded as a character, he's a vehicle for the player's imagination. But despite this apparent lack of identity, he still has some characteristics that ground him in the game's world. He's a suburban kid with a loving family, a passion for baseball, and an otherwise ordinary life. It's all left incredibly vague to provide breathing room for the player. But like his silent protagonist counterparts, Ness embarks on a grand quest, destined to stop Giygas from destroying the universe. He's instructed to visit 8 sanctuaries, recording melodies that will give him the strength to face Giygas. Naturally, he isn't alone. The prophecy speaks of 3 boys and a girl, so Ness is joined by Paula, Jeff, and Pooh, and their personalities actually highlight just how much of a nobody he is. Now I'm not out here saying the other kids have the emotional depth of classic Shakespeare, but they have just enough characterization to demonstrate their impact on the game's world. Paula is a famous psychic prodigy whose entire town panics when she's kidnapped. Jeff introduces himself as a weak, shy, and reckless kid, defined by his genius father's reputation, who goes on to say, "Jeff wets his bed sometimes, but other than that, he's a good boy." Pooh is the prince of a foreign land, who undergoes a brutal spiritual trial before joining the group. And then there's Ness.
Okay.
Just an ordinary kid living an ordinary life. Oh, and he has psychic powers too. But as the kids travel to the 8 sanctuary points, something unusual happens. Ness starts to reveal layers of character that go beyond silent protagonist. You see, each melody triggers a memory from Ness's past. Just as the 8 melodies combine to create a full song, the memories combine to create a flashback. It centers around Ness as a baby, surrounded by his parents' love. We see his dog as a puppy, his red cap being placed on his head, his mom urging him to be a thoughtful, strong boy, and his baby bottle moving with PSI. The final memory he collected is especially striking, Ness watching himself as a baby, which is exactly what he's doing here by piecing all these memories together. The 8 melodies Ness collects throughout his adventure are symbolic of his identity, a boy who is always loved and supported by his family, even in his most primal, vulnerable state. And that context reframes the entire game. At the beginning, Buzz casually tells Ness the fate of the world rests on his shoulders, and he just quietly accepts his destiny.
Okay.
But looking back, Ness wasn't just being told to save the world, he was being told to leave his family, and by extension, the love, security, and comfort they provided all his life. Taking that into account, doesn't it make more sense why he periodically gets homesick throughout the game? It's a reminder that Ness isn't ready to let go of childhood security. To take this a step further, each time Ness remembers the past, the kids are fully restored, demonstrating that nostalgia literally heals him. However, this also reveals a weakness. Ness isn't ready to face his destiny. Which is why after collecting the melodies, he enters the place where his subconscious puts everything on display. Magicant. Ness wakes up in a dreamlike fantasy world that looks just like a Nick Jr. show or something. The vibrant colors, smiling sunflowers, and strange world geometry reminds me of what a child might draw with their crayons. This place is the ultimate embodiment of Ness's identity. In the Japanese version, Ness is naked because we're literally seeing the most private parts of himself. In all localized versions, Ness is in his pajamas to play into the fact that Magicant isn't a real place. The first NPC we meet welcomes us to this strange realm, telling us how Magicant is filled with beauty and kindness, but also sorrow and hatred. There's even an evil and violent side of Ness buried deep within his psyche at a place known as the Sea of Eden. Wow. That's his purpose in Magicant, to confront the dark parts of his mind, and, unlike other areas of the game, it's impossible to get lost because there's just one linear path to the Sea of Eden. I believe Ness purposefully constructed Magicant in this way because he realized he's out of time. Once he wakes up, he'll have to fulfill his destiny and confront Giygas. But to be the one that saves the world, he needs to be confident within himself, and that means facing his own inner doubts, fears, and repressed feelings of anger. Although Ness is certainly capable of holding his own in battle, it's easy to forget that he's just a kid, which is why the Lumine Hall Sanctuary reading his thoughts out loud feels so humanizing. Ness repeats the phrase "soon I'll be" 3 times because he knows he's reaching the end of his journey, but he's still unsure about what could happen. Magicant is key to Ness resolving his doubts. Rather than just hearing people say he'll save the world, he'll finally believe it himself. But that means stepping out of his comfort zone, which is represented beautifully through the level design. Magicant is broken up into 3 sections. The starting grassy area, a white section filled with childhood friends and memories, and finally, a pink twisted labyrinth home to repressed feelings, ending with the entrance to the Sea of Eden. Ness begins his Magicant journey where he feels the most safe, with his family literally by his side. The overgrown vegetables are staples of home-cooked meals, and the lush green grass makes it clear that he carefully preserves this area of his mind, which we already know, the kid's a mama's boy. Ness even carved out a corner of the map for his family, which just goes to show how they're the cornerstone of his identity. Just like in the real world, his mom will ask him if he wants to rest. Choosing yes will prompt her to say, "If you wish, you can stay here forever, I'll make some steak for you." But if you choose no, she'll say, "Yeah, that's right. You can't even think about being tired at a time like this." This really demonstrates just how conflicted he is. He wants to stay with his family forever, but knows that he needs to be responsible and carry on. And if it wasn't already obvious, each NPC is Ness's interpretation of that person, so their reactions play out the way he believes they would in real life. To take this a step further, talking to specific characters will change that entire area's color scheme, which I believe is a way of visualizing Ness's response to certain thoughts. For example, his mother turns the area pink because he loves her. Another notable NPC in the starting area is this bunny that urges Ness to take his time and explore Magicant. Obviously this message is more so directed to the player themselves, but I'd like to think this is Ness's way of delaying the inevitable. Regardless, Ness heads deeper towards the second part of Magicant. Along this narrow bridge, he encounters two previous enemies.
You kicked my butt badly, I won't forget. You destroyed my pride.
Ness does something here that RPG protagonists hardly do. He considers the consequences of defeating enemies and feels remorse. Because they're positioned so early on in the level and not repressed within the pink swirl, it's obvious this guilt weighs on him often. Like I mentioned before, the second area of Magicant is home to Ness's childhood friends and memories, including snowmen he built over the years and even his younger self. By default, the grass in this section takes on a more whitish appearance, and I thought a lot about what that could indicate. The most obvious interpretation is that it represents purity, in this case, childhood innocence. But another idea I had is that it could indicate that this period of his life is frozen in time. The grass in the first area is healthy because no matter how much his life changes, Ness's family will always be alongside him. Whereas growing up sometimes means leaving behind childhood friends, and that disconnect he feels towards them caused the grass to wither in color. This actually makes a lot of sense when we speak to the younger Ness. He says, "Hey, let's play ball. Do you prefer comics or playing games? What? You're busy?" Some of the other kids in this little conga line share a similar sentiment of wanting to play with Ness, but realizing he's too busy nowadays. Because these kids are grouped together, they share the same purpose, to make Ness feel guilty about wanting to grow up. And do you realize which character is leading these kids? I'd like you to take your time, cause this country will disappear when you wake up. Interestingly enough, Porky also appears in this section but away from the other kids. Although Ness considers him a friend, he's conflicted on where he fits into his life. This is only reinforced through his dialogue. "Ness, you're so lucky. I envy you. I have no luck. But Ness? Well, okay. Let's be friends forever, alright?" Ness understands that they've become rivals, but still refuses to completely villainize Porky in his mind. All he knows for certain is that the friendship is ruined, which is why I believe Porky is surrounded by literal ruins here. Further along, a house is located right before the pink swirl. Inside are the flying men, who outright tell us that they symbolize Ness's courage, and it makes sense. He's about to leave the safety of his family, friends, and childhood memories that make up who he is. He needs to gather up his courage because now, he's jumping into the unknown. Before that, however, there's two final NPCs Ness encounters. The first is another enemy, who says,
Ness, I still feel pain where you wounded me.
That's an awfully dark thought compared to the prior enemies, which puts into perspective that we're about to see a darker side to Ness. Then, we see the same guide that welcomed us into Magicant. The Sea of Eden is filled with ultimate intelligence. You can't go there unless you're truly ready. It's a place where you can touch the truth of the universe. Going there may bring sorrow. What an interesting choice of words. The truth of the universe. It makes you realize that Ness is doing all of this to fulfill a destiny that's bigger than himself. It plays out on a universal scale. After all, Giygas was initially described as the universal cosmic destroyer. That space imagery brings attention to the stars and planets that populate the sky in every section of Magicant. Because the weight of that grand destiny travels with him, no matter if he's holding on to family, nostalgic memories, or traversing the evil parts of his mind. And with that, Ness steps over to the other side. By doing this, he's metaphorically left his comfort zone with courage by his side. As I showed before, this area is literally twisted, likely because this is where Ness's messy emotions live. And, of course, the shape of the path demonstrates that he's looking inward. At the beginning of this section is a mirror image of Ness, who gives him a baseball cap that he previously lost. That hat is an iconic part of his identity, so this interaction almost feels like Ness reassuring himself that even though he's making the hard decision to grow up, that doesn't mean he'll lose himself in the process. How the hell does he even bring items from Magicant back into the real world anyways? This area doesn't really have many visual details, unless you account for these metal pillars. It gives off a lifeless alien vibe compared to the organic imagery we became accustomed to in earlier sections of Magicant. That means Ness does not visit this part of himself at all, and he's not welcome here either. Huge packs of enemies can be found all around the area. If it's any consolation to Ness, the game often feels just as overwhelmed in this area because it struggles to process how many enemies are on screen. Luckily, the flying men are there to help. But the truth is, if you've leveled up Ness properly, he can decimate these enemies on his own. The flying men don't really tip the scales in battle, they're just a safety net he doesn't actually need. But despite that, Ness clings to them anyway. Every time one dies, a tombstone appears outside of their home. At first, these graves are memorial sites, reminders of how Ness's courage fought bravely against evil. But as more of them die, that meaning changes. Their sacrifices stop meaning anything at all, with each tombstone having less and less detail. The last flying man outright scolds Ness for leaning on them out of desperation instead of true courage, a projection of self-doubt. And if they all die, the final tombstone coldly reads Tombstone. Whether the flying men live or fall, the truth remains the same. Ness always had courage. And with that realization, he reaches out to a twisted metal root that pulls him into the Sea of Eden. Despite being told that this area is the center of Ness's negative thoughts, everything from the music to the visuals actually feels peaceful. Self-reflection requires being calm like the water. But here, that calmness is fractured into shifting colors, hinting at the complexity of his inner thoughts. Before moving forward, we should talk about the elephant in Sea of Eden. It's almost certainly a reference to the religious Garden of Eden story. As everyone knows, that story centers on Adam and Eve eating the forbidden fruit, gaining knowledge of good and evil. In a similar way, Ness is about to confront both the good and evil within himself. But before he can reach his dark side, Ness gets ambushed by a ton of krakens. The kraken was a previous boss that he needed the help of his friends to take down. But after realizing his own strength in the last section, it becomes apparent to both Ness and the player that these bosses are no better than common enemies at this point. It's like Ness's mind is trying to give him one last scare, but he's traveled too far to fall victim to bullshit. Finally, at the center of the sea rests the Mani Mani statue, a symbol for corruption throughout EarthBound. Interacting with it projects Ness's insecurities.
I'm the evil part of your brain. You can't beat me, because you are the one who forced me into being.
Just like that, he's plunged into battle with Ness's nightmare. That nightmare being the idea of succumbing to his darkest thoughts, just like the Mani Mani statue did to otherwise innocent characters earlier in the game. That really brings home the idea of losing innocence being a negative concept, feelings that Ness confronted earlier in the childhood section of Magicant. Ness probably frames it this way because of Itoi's own childhood trauma. When Itoi accidentally wandered into the wrong theater as a child, he was suddenly confronted with something terrifying, an abrupt, unwanted glimpse into the adult world that scarred him. In a way, Ness's journey mirrors that loss of innocence. He's a kid forced to witness things no child should ever face, and like Itoi, he's forever changed by it. At the end of the battle, the nightmare looming over Ness finally disappears. And in the silent aftermath, a voice reaches out to him. Giygas' goal is to destroy you. Listen carefully. Everything in the universe could be destroyed at the hands of Giygas, but he and his followers are also in trouble. The Apple of Enlightenment has foretold that Giygas' attempt will fail. It is because of the existence of a boy named Ness. That's me. Listen, free your mind and know what you must do. Your destiny has already been decided. Where should we go? You already know within the reaches of your mind. And with that realization, he's able to channel the power of each sanctuary, gaining a massive stat boost that symbolizes the fact that he has finally come of age. When Ness wakes up in the real world, his friends don't question his instructions to go to Saturn Valley, nor does he question himself. And with this confidence, Ness faces his final test. Giygas, the ultimate embodiment of lost innocence. Without Magicant, without growing up, Ness would not stand a chance here. Earlier in this video, we established that in order to grow up, Ness needed to stop being so dependent on family and friends. But to win, Paula has to pray to the friends they met throughout the game, including Ness's own family. That's because although growing up requires a sense of independence, it doesn't mean losing relationships and the support that comes with them, just as it doesn't mean losing yourself in the process. What makes everything hit harder is the fact that Ness has a 0% chance of becoming homesick after level 75, which is around where he's supposed to be at this point in the game. Also, we, the player, are one of the participants that prays for the safety of Ness and his friends. This, along with the entire Magicant sequence, would seem to confirm that the player is a separate entity from Ness, but I don't think it's that simple. By nature of being a silent protagonist, Ness is both himself and the player at the same time. Just like how EarthBound is both a funny game and one that holds a humanizing amount of emotional depth. This kind of dual storytelling is what makes Itoi's games feel so impactful. There's so much to interpret beyond the surface that it's no wonder why the Mother series gained the cult following that it did, which is still going strong decades later despite knowing that there will never be a new game. When the meteor fell in Onet that fateful night, Ness blended into the world like any other kid because realistically, that's how he saw himself. He starts off as a boy with potential, but by the end of his journey, he's grown into a psychic powerhouse of a young adult. Magicant was not another surreal set piece like Moonside. It was the place where Ness came of age. Even Apple Kid reflects on this. The chance of Giygas gaining victory with his monstrous plans is 99%. However, your courage has produced a 1% chance that he fails. I must try to come to a deeper understanding of this trait called courage. Despite everything, Ness is still himself at the end of the game. A simple kid who loves baseball.
Okay.
It doesn't matter that he's got newfound knowledge and power. He still confronts Giygas with a bat in his hands. With that being said, thanks so much for watching and have a good one.